Welcome back to Jack and Rex Tales. The boy was 7 years old, and he was not crying. That was the thing that would stay with people long after this story ended. Not the storm, not the hospital, not even what happened inside that lobby. It was the image of a 7-year-old child standing alone on an icy sidewalk in the worst blizzard Silver Creek, Colorado had seen in 30 years. Coat far too thin, sneakers soaked through, snow settling on his dark hair like the world had simply forgotten he was there, and not crying. Not once. Because in his arms was a newborn baby, his sister, 3 days old, wrapped in a single hospital blanket that was already losing its warmth. And behind him, slumped against the cold brick wall of Silver Creek General Hospital, like a candle that had finally burned all the way down, was his mother. Burning with fever, barely breathing. She had made it to those hospital doors. She had used everything she had left in her body to get that far. But the doors had closed on them. No insurance, no paperwork, no entry. So the boy stood where his mother had fallen. He pulled his baby sister tighter against his chest. He looked down at her small face, eyes closed, completely unaware of the cold, completely trusting. And then he looked back up at the street. He didn't know what was coming. He just knew he wasn't going to move. 2 blocks away, a man and his dog stepped out into the same storm. Jack had not planned to go far that night. He rarely did. A walk through the quiet streets of Silver Creek before midnight had become his ritual, the thing that settled his mind enough to allow a few hours of sleep. 22 years of military service had rewired something deep inside him, and real, peaceful sleep had become a luxury he no longer expected. So he walked, and Rex walked beside him. And the two of them communicated in the way they always did, without words, without noise, with nothing but the steady rhythm of 2 creatures who trusted each other completely. Jack was 50 years old, built like a man who had spent decades carrying things, equipment, responsibility, loss. His face was lined and calm in the way that faces become when a person has stopped pretending that the world is simpler than it is. His eyes were dark and steady. His hands, even now, even in retirement, were the hands of someone ready. He had moved to Silver Creek 3 years ago, away from the noise, away from the memories that had a way of getting louder in crowded places. He had a small wooden cabin at the edge of town, a wood stove that kept the cold out, a porch where he could sit and watch the mountains exist in their patient, wordless way. He had his pension, he had his coffee, he had Rex. Rex was enough. Rex was a German shepherd, 4 years old, with a chest like a barrel and amber eyes that seemed to hold their own quiet light. He had served as a military working dog before an injury retired him early. When Jack heard about him through a veterans network, he drove 6 hours without hesitation to bring him home. They had recognized something in each other immediately. 2 soldiers without a war, both learning the difficult, unglamorous work of simply being still. That night they moved through the empty streets in silence. Snow fell in thick, heavy curtains. The town was asleep. The only sounds were the wind moving through the pines and the soft press of Rex's paws into fresh powder. They turned the corner toward the hospital. Rex stopped. Not gradually, not a slow hesitation. He stopped as though the ground itself had told him to. Every muscle in his body went rigid. His ears shot forward like antennas locking onto a signal. His nose lifted and worked the frozen air in quick, precise movements. And then from somewhere low in his chest came a sound that Jack had learned over years never to ignore. A long, urgent whine. Not fear, not aggression, something closer to alarm. The sound Rex made when something in the world was deeply, seriously wrong. Jack followed his gaze. At first, there was only the glow of the hospital lobby through the glass doors, the blur of falling snow, the dark shapes of the building against a darker sky. And then, slowly, the way your eyes find something they weren't expecting to find, he saw the small figure on the sidewalk. He saw the coat that was too thin. He saw the bundle pressed against a small chest. He saw the woman against the wall. Jack stood completely still for one long moment. Then he moved. He crossed the distance in long, deliberate strides. Rex matched him step for step, not pulling ahead, not lagging behind, simply there, the way he always was. When Jack reached the boy, he crouched down to eye level. He didn't rush. He didn't reach out immediately. He looked at the boy's face first, really looked at it, the way you look at someone when you want them to know that you see them, not just their situation, them. The boy stared back. His eyes were dark and exhausted, and older than any 7-year-old's eyes had a right to be. But he didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He just held his sister a little tighter and waited to find out if this man was going to be one more door that closed. Rex made the decision for both of them. He stepped forward slowly, gently, and pressed his broad head against the boy's side. Not pushing, just present. Warm and solid and real in a way that the cold night had not been. The boy looked down at Rex. Something in his jaw loosened, just slightly, just enough. Jack looked at the mother. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, but thin and rapid. Her skin was burning through her jacket. She needed help right now, not in 10 minutes, not after paperwork, right now. He stood up. He looked at the boy. "Son," he said quietly, "I've got you, all 3 of you. You don't have to stand guard anymore." The boy said nothing, but he nodded once, a small, exhausted, dignified nod. Jack bent down and lifted the mother into his arms. She was frighteningly light, the way people become when they have been running on nothing for too long. Her head fell against his shoulder. He adjusted his grip and walked toward the hospital doors, Rex staying close to the boy staying close to Rex, the 4 of them moving together through the snow like they had always been meant to find each other on exactly this night. The lobby was warm and bright, painfully warm compared to what they had just come in from, the kind of warmth that almost hurts when you've been cold long enough. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A few plastic chairs lined the walls. A television in the corner played a weather report that nobody was watching. A woman at the reception desk looked up. Then a man in an administrative uniform stepped forward. His expression was not unkind exactly, but it was practiced, professional. The expression of someone who has learned to process people rather than see them. "Do they have insurance?" he asked. Jack looked at him steadily. "She's running a fever of what I'd guess is 104. She has a newborn and a 7-year-old, and she's been outside in that storm." He paused. "Get her help. I'll pay whatever it costs." The administrator's expression didn't change much. "I understand, sir, but there's a process. We need to verify. She doesn't have time for a process." "Sir, I understand, but our policy—" "Your policy," Jack said, and his voice was quiet, controlled, the voice of a man who has learned that the most dangerous thing is not the loudest voice in the room, is going to let a young mother die on your doorstep, in a blizzard, with her children. The lobby had gone still. A nurse nearby had stopped typing. An orderly by the far door had turned to watch. The administrator opened his mouth again, and then a voice came from across the room. "Jack!" One word, but the way it was spoken, stunned, disbelieving, almost reverent, made everyone turn. A doctor had emerged from the hallway beyond the desk. He was perhaps 40, with tired eyes and a stethoscope still looped around his neck. He was staring at Jack with an expression that was difficult to describe, the expression of a man seeing something he had thought about for years but never expected to actually see again. Jack turned. He looked at the doctor. Something shifted in his face, slow recognition, like a photograph developing. "Dr. Callahan," he said quietly. The doctor crossed the room. His steps were quick, and his voice, when he spoke again, was not entirely steady. 12 years ago, in a place far from Colorado, in a vehicle that had caught fire on a road that was supposed to be safe, a soldier had pulled a young Army medic from the wreckage with no concern for his own safety. That medic had gone on to become a doctor. He had built a career, he had built a life, and he had never forgotten the face of the man who made that possible. He looked at the administrator. When he spoke, his voice was completely calm and completely final. "This woman gets a room. Right now. No paperwork, no processing, no delay. This man's word is good enough for me." He paused, "And if anyone has a problem with that, they can bring it to me personally." Nobody moved to argue. A young nurse named Sarah had watched everything from the moment Jack walked through those doors. She had watched a veteran carry a stranger through a blizzard. She had watched him offer to pay for someone he had met 5 minutes ago. She had watched a cold policy bend under the weight of one man's refusal to accept that it shouldn't. She had recorded it on her phone, not to cause trouble, because she felt, in the way you feel certain things in your chest before your brain catches up, that the world needed to see this. She was right. Within 72 hours, the video had traveled across the country. Americans of every age, every background, every political belief watched a decorated veteran stand in a hospital lobby and quietly refuse to let the world be as small as some people needed it to be. The outrage was immediate and enormous. The hospital issued a statement. Reporters called. Television crews appeared on the streets of Silver Creek. Jack didn't answer the phone. He was too busy sitting in a waiting room chair, a sleeping 7-year-old boy leaning against his arm, Rex resting his head across the boy's feet, all three of them waiting to hear that the mother was going to be okay. She was. Her name was Maria. She was 28 years old. She had fled a situation that had taken everything from her, her savings, her confidence, her sense of what tomorrow might look like. She had come to Silver Creek because she heard it was a quiet town, a decent town. She had given birth to her daughter in this very hospital 4 days ago and had been managing on almost nothing since. When the fever took hold, she had gathered her son and her newborn and walked to the only place she could think of. When she woke up and the nurse told her what had happened, what Jack had done, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked if she could see the man with the dog. 2 weeks later, the cabin that had once held only silence held something entirely different. Maria and her children were staying in Jack's spare room, just temporarily, she had insisted, just until she found her footing again. Jack had said fine without making a thing of it. He had driven into town and bought a second-hand bed frame and a box of children's books and a bag of dog treats because Rex deserved acknowledgement for what he had started. The boy's name was Daniel. Daniel, it turned out, had questions about everything. About the wood stove and how it worked and whether you could cook on it, about Rex's training and whether Rex knew any tricks and whether Rex could understand human language, about the mountains visible through the kitchen window and how deep the snow got and whether there were bears in summer. Jack answered every question with the same patient, unhurried attention. He had not talked this much in 3 years. He found, to his surprise, that he didn't mind it. Rex had claimed Daniel completely. Every night, without being asked, without being invited, he crossed the room and lay down beside the boy's bed. Not on it, just beside it. A warm, breathing, living presence between Daniel and whatever bad dreams tried to come. Daniel slept deeply for the first time in months. Jack could hear the difference, the absence of restless sounds in the night, and something in his chest shifted quietly every time. The baby, Grace, slept near the fireplace in a borrowed bassinet while Maria recovered her strength. Some evenings, Jack would sit in his chair and read, and the fire would pop and settle, and Grace would make the small sounds that new babies make, and Rex would lift his head and look at her with his amber eyes as though taking inventory, making sure she was accounted for. Jack would watch all of this and feel something he had not felt in a very long time. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter and more durable than happiness. Purpose. Then, the storm came back. Not from the sky this time. Maria's parents, wealthy, connected, and deeply ashamed of the story that had spread across the country, filed for emergency custody of Daniel and Grace. Their lawyers argued that poverty made Maria unfit, that her judgment had endangered her children, that the children would be better served in a stable home. The paperwork arrived on a Wednesday morning. Maria read it at the kitchen table while Jack stood by the window with his coffee. When she finished, she set it down carefully and pressed her hands flat on the table and looked at them for a long time without speaking. Jack set down his coffee. He sat across from her. "We'll fight it," he said. Maria shook her head slowly. "They have money. They have lawyers. I have nothing." "You have Daniel," Jack said. "And Daniel has something better than lawyers." He was right. Within days of the story spreading further, a family attorney in Denver contacted them and offered to represent Maria without charge. Veterans organizations sent letters to the court attesting to Jack's character. Strangers from across the country donated enough money to cover months of stability. The community of Silver Creek, a town that had always believed in showing up for its own, packed the courtroom on the day of the hearing. And then Daniel was called to speak. The courtroom went completely still. He walked to the front with the careful, serious steps of a child who understood that something important was happening. He sat down. He looked at the judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and an expression that gave nothing away. He didn't talk about legal things. He didn't talk about money or stability or any of the words the lawyers had been using all morning. He said, "It's warm now." He said it simply, like it was the most important fact in the world, because to him it was. "Rex sleeps by my bed so I don't have bad dreams anymore," he continued. "And my mom smiles again. She didn't used to smile." He paused, thinking carefully. "Jack doesn't talk a lot, but he always answers when I ask something, and he never makes us feel like we're in the way." He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked back up at the judge. "I just want to go home, to the cabin. That's home now." The judge looked at him over her reading glasses for a long time. Then she looked down at the papers before her. In the gallery, there was not a dry eye in the room. A veteran in the back row, a man in his 70s with a chest full of service ribbons, pressed his fist to his mouth and looked at the ceiling. An elderly woman 2 seats over reached over and took his hand without a word. The decision came swiftly. Maria kept her children. And months later, on a cold but gentle December evening, with snow falling soft and quiet outside the cabin windows, something else happened that nobody had planned and everybody somehow felt was inevitable. Maria had spoken to a family attorney again, quietly, privately, about what it would mean for Jack to become the children's legal guardian, not to replace anyone, not to erase anything, but to make official what had already become true, that this man, this quiet, steady, purposeful man, was already family. Jack had said very little when she brought it up. He had looked out the window for a while. Then he had looked at Rex, who was watching him from across the room with those amber eyes. Then he had said yes. That December evening, Jack lifted Daniel up. The boy was getting heavy, growing fast, eating like someone was going to take the food away, and held him at the height of the Christmas tree they had cut together from the edge of the woods that morning. Daniel reached out and placed a handmade star at the very top, a star they had made together from cardboard and aluminum foil and an extraordinary amount of tape. It was crooked. It was perfect. Rex lay near the fireplace, his chin on his paws, his eyes moving slowly between the people in the room the way he always did, checking, accounting, making sure everyone was present and safe. Grace slept in Maria's arms on the old couch. The fire crackled and settled. The snow fell without urgency outside the window. Jack stood back and looked at all of it. At the crooked star, at the boy who had stood guard in a blizzard, at the woman who had walked through fire to protect her children, at the baby who had come into this world in the hardest possible way and fallen asleep in warmth, at the dog who had heard something in the dark that a human ear would have missed and had refused to walk past it. He had come to Silver Creek to be alone. He had come to find quiet. He had found something so much better. They say that some people are called to serve, that the uniform is just the beginning, that the real mission, the deepest one, the one that asks everything of you, often comes later, after the medals are put away, after the noise has settled, after you have convinced yourself that your most important days are behind you. Jack would tell you that the most important night of his life was not overseas. It was not in a burning vehicle on a dangerous road. It was not in a war zone with a weapon in his hands. It was on a sidewalk in Silver Creek, Colorado, in the middle of a blizzard, when a dog stopped walking and a man chose to follow. It was when a 7-year-old boy looked up at a stranger with exhausted, dignified eyes and decided, just barely, just enough, to trust. The greatest battles are not always fought with courage that the world can see. Sometimes they are fought in hospital lobbies, at kitchen tables, in courtrooms, in the quiet hours before dawn, when a man sits in a chair and listens to the sound of a child sleeping peacefully in the next room, and understands for the first time in years that this right here, is what he was always meant to protect. Not a border, not a position, a family. Duty doesn't end when the uniform comes off. Purpose doesn't expire with a retirement date. And love, real love, the kind built slowly, from showing up, from answering questions, from laying a blanket over someone who has fallen asleep on the couch, that kind of love doesn't ask for anything in return. It just asks you to open the door. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you once were, or something you still believe about this world, then you already understand what Jack and Rex Tales is all about. Every story we tell here is a reminder that loyalty still walks among us, that courage still lives in quiet places, that kindness, patient, stubborn, unglamorous kindness, is still the most powerful force in this world. If you believe that too, subscribe to Jack and Rex Tales. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today, because somewhere out there, someone is standing in the cold, and all they need is for one person to follow their dog into the dark. Jack and Rex Tales, where every story reminds us what it truly means to be brave.